What's up, everybody? Tyson Roush. Let's talk Jets. Hope everybody's doing excellent, having a great weekend. First Sunday without football, which kind of makes everything, reality set in that we're ready to move on to the offseason, free agency, the draft, and everything else. So, last night watching UFC fights, which were great, and a friend asked me, he's like, so what do you think about Jamal Adams? And I'm like, well, I'm glad he's gone. He's like, no, what do you think about him returning? And I'm like, what? Like, what are you even talking about? And then he explained to me what's going on social media where I guess Jamal likes some tweets and all those other things. There's hints that he could want to come back. And to me, this just makes no sense on so many different levels. And this is coming from a person that was an enormous Jamal Adams fan. Like we did a charity event with NYSF magazine. He came, he did a great job with that. I have an autographed jersey by him. I went to a party that him and Marcus May hosted for the draft. And he was the face of the franchise. He was supposedly, he acted like he wanted to be part of the solution, part of the answer to get this organization turned around, bring the winning back to New York and everything else. And then towards the end, he became part of the problem where he whined and bitched and moaned and tried to find any way possible to get his way out of town. And he ended up in Seattle. Thankfully, Joe Douglas got great compensation for him, which ended up being Garrett Wilson and AVT. But it was an ugly ending for Jamal Adams with the Jets. It was almost like he was spitting in the faces of the fans. It was disgusting, to be honest with you. And then, so in Seattle, he flashed a little bit. He got that mega the payday he wanted. And then his play deteriorated to the point where he's a liability in coverage. His tackling is suspect, injured all the time. And then towards the end of last year, they basically was a healthy scratch. We're like, you know what, we're good. Like, Seahawks are ready to move on from him. And then other things on social media, he did things that were just disturbing and disgusting, including insulting Connor Hughes' wife, where people were kind of commenting on Jamal Adams' play on the field, and obviously he was way too sensitive and went over the top in his responses, and it was just ugly. So for the Jets, the fit with the Jets, first and foremost, free agency should be all about free agency. Free agency, no kidding, about the offense. So, but the Jets may have a hole at safety. Jordan Whitehead could be a free agent. But if you want to find another fit, you look at, I would look for the Jets at safety, try to get Chuck Clark back. He got hurt last year, but he's a hybrid kind of player, good range, good tackler, can play in the box. You bring back Ashton Davis, who is developing into a player, and their salaries will be a lot more than what even Jamal could even ask. So in terms of just the player, he's often injured, plays deteriorating. He's a big name with a big profile and a distraction. And you look at this young nucleus of the Jet team where you have, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner. It's a young, impressionable team trying to find their ways to winning, trying to have this new culture. I don't think Jamal Adams is a good fit at all on any level. So while the story may be great on social media and everything like that, and there's some fans like, oh, we can get the old Jamal back. You're not getting the old Jamal back. And I think to me, it's like the damage is done in my eyes. Now, that could be an old school way of thinking. I don't know, but I don't see the fit. I don't understand it. And I wouldn't even, I wouldn't embrace it. So the second biggest news of the day, and no surprise whatsoever, is David Bakhtiari with the Packers is most likely going to get released. They get an enormous cap savings, and then automatically it goes where he's linked to the Jets. And it's for a couple different reasons. First and foremost, he's best friends with Aaron Rodgers. They're extremely close. Secondly, the Jets have holes on the offensive line, especially at left tackle. Now, with Bakhtiari, it's much different than Jamal Adams, where he's a quality player. He has the same injury issues, but you know what you're getting on and off the field when he's healthy. So now the thing is, how often is he healthy? And that's the problem. He missed like 45 games since 2020. In 2022, he did play well, but last year he didn't. He was hurt again. So what kind of player are you getting? And to me, it's like, I think if you bring him in under a reasonable contract, or maybe he gives some kind of discount to play to Aaron Rodgers, but make it incentive laden. Like, listen, you play 17 games, you get a $5 million boost. You play 17 games, Jets go to playoffs, get another $2 million. You make Pro Bowl, you get this. Like, kind of do that to kind of give yourself some insurance in case he gets hurt again. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I wouldn't want to bring him in as your solution at left tackle. He could be a depth piece. He could be a great mentor to Tippmann, to Carter Warren, to Elijah Vera Tucker. But I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, okay, that's our answer. Like, we got left tackle, we move on. If you want to bring him in as depth and competition, and you still go out and get Tyron Smith, or you go out and you get Fashanu or Alt in the draft, I want to have multiple options at left tackle. So if you want to bring, I'm okay with the move, with the caveat that it can't be like your big statement move on the offseason. The other thing too is there's a lot of talk about Bryce Huff and what's going on there. And I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion The Jets aren't going to tag him. He's going to be gone. And it's unfortunate, but there's this mindset that it's like, well, it's no big deal. To me, it is a big deal because if we learned anything from the playoffs, defense matters, pass rush matters, speed on defense matters. So Huff brings all that to the game. And then you're saying, well, Will McDonald can maybe do that. The maybe is great. Like you saw the big step from Jermaine Johnson. You're hoping that McDonald could follow in those same path. There's no guarantees for that. But also it's like you're almost taking away a strength of the team. If you have Huff, Johnson, and McDonald, why would you? It's like taking away from the strength of the team that now has to be replaced elsewhere. So if you let Huff walk, how do you replace him? You're not going to get somebody in the draft. You got to figure the draft is going to be all about offense. Then maybe you go to later rounds. And I understand Huff's an undrafted free agent, but I mean, you're not going to find that guys can give you 10 sacks right off the bat. So then you go to free agency and spend money. So now it's like, wait, you don't want to spend money on Huff, and then you're going to spend money elsewhere. Now maybe $8-9 million less, but sometimes it's quality over quantity, right? So I hate the move. I hate how they're handling it, but I guess this is kind of where we're at, and it could have been avoided. The Jets signed Huff last year, like a lot of us talked about. Other things to look at, you're looking at all the dead cap space and all the moves that need to be made, and the Jets have, I think, $18 million in dead cap space, and even the Carl Lawson thing's got to annoy you where they didn't play him most of the year. At the trade deadline, maybe you could have shipped him out. How does that impact your cap? So some interesting moves, but then it's like, I think at this point, everybody's saying the same thing. If you want to try to figure out ways to get cap space, because the Jets desperately need it, you could extend DJ Reed, you could extend Tyler Conklin, the Michael Carter second, you can give those guys all new deals. In terms of restructuring contracts, that's where it gets kind of tricky because you're kicking your problems down the curb a little bit. So it's like, all right, if you restructure, say, CJ Mosley, Tomlinson, and whoever else, it helped John Franklin Myers. It may help you this year, but sooner or later, you got to pay the piper, right? Like, so it's like, all right, we got to have it this year. Now next year's going to be the problem, or the year after. So it's a tricky way to do business, but when you're in a win now mode like they are, you got to figure out, like, well, this is what we got to do to get by and maximize Aaron Rodgers being here. So the last thing to talk about is all these stories, and the Tony Pauline story that came out made a lot of headlines where, he really ripped Joe Douglas, ripped Saleh. Not ripped, but he shared a lot of like disturbing stories about the organization. And it comes down to who do you really want to believe? When the Athletic story came out from Zach Rosenblatt and Diane Razzini, they were like, oh, you can't believe this, you can't believe that. Tony Pauline's story came out, some of the similar things, and he said he had to research more to make sure it was legitimate. And to me, it's like you can look at it a couple different ways. As players leave the organization, sooner or later they start talking, whether it's Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, Dalvin Cook, Michael Carter, could be Rex Hogan, could be whoever it is. Stories start to get out. As coaches start leaving, whether they're fired or replaced or whatever else, they're going to start talking. So there are going to be leaks, there are going to be stories. Now, what you want to believe is truly up to you. Some people don't want to acknowledge anything. And to me, I still continue to think the Jets are dysfunctional on a couple different levels. I think Woody Johnson is actively involved. The power struggle between Douglas and Saleh would not surprise me, especially when you're losing this much and there's a lot of pressure and you got a lot of things to answer for. Now, they're doubling down the way they're handling the staff is kind of, the whole Keith Carter thing is kind of strange to me, but that's a solid guy and you can't, Douglas won't fire him. Like, it's interesting to see how it's perceived. But the other thing too is everybody has a source now. Like, a lot of people have sources in the Jets. Me, you, everybody has got stories. And once a story is shared amongst friends, that story goes all over social media and it becomes fact. And you kind of got to decipher through that, and that's where you believe what you want. Like, there's a report that Woody Johnson didn't want to pay her backup quarterback. He's like, you know what? Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson is good enough. You got to find a way to do it. And he didn't adjust there. And there's reports saying that's not true, that it was basically a Joe Douglas thing where it's loyalty to Zach Wilson and a belief in him and Aaron Rodgers being the mentor. So it's a lot to decipher. The only thing I know is I'm at the point now where it's like you're going into free agency, and I'm more into like the show me mode, where I don't care about your new uniforms. I don't care about One Jets Drive. I don't care about T-shirt slogans. You want to see a concise blueprint in free agency. You want to see him make a run at prominent players that can help the team win now. And then you got to see it on the field in terms of just better play all over, especially on offense, offensive line, play calling, and everything else. And the challenge remains is, will free agents want to come here first and foremost? And then will the Jets actually pay them? And to me, I'll continue to say, I think the market, just say for wide receivers, for example, could dwindle quickly where a lot of guys are going to stay where they are. Or I can't see the Jets spending big on T. Higgins. So say he goes elsewhere just because he's going to get paid big money, right? If Mike Evans stays with the Bucks, Pittman stays with the Colts, then you start scrambling. Like the Cortland Sutton trade idea, I like that idea a lot. But I still continue to think that if you go like a Tyler Boyd, Curtis Samuel route, you have Garrett Wilson, you hope to get something out of Lazard, and maybe Brownlee or Gibson continue to develop. Ruckert, get a little bit more out of him. Conklin's very good, with Rodgers. And then you get running backs out of backfield that can catch, primarily Breece Hall. That offense is quite good enough. And you could take the money you're not spending there and apply it to the offensive line. And you can kind of build things up in different areas. So I'm curious to see how they work this out. Like, free agency is going to be fascinating to see. Can Aaron Rodgers can recruit? What do people honestly believe? They think he's going to play 1 year or two? And does the general manager and head coach on the hot seat kind of hinder anything where there's a Jets tax and the Jets got to pay more? So never a dull moment with this team. So in summary, I probably rambled and crossed my stories. I had notes. I didn't read really any of them. So I hope everybody's well, and I'll talk to you later.